Dear listeners, before starting the story, I ask you to subscribe to the channel under this video. Your subscription motivates me to make quality content for you. I also ask you to share your opinion about the story in the comments, that's all. Enjoy listening. I was born and raised in Seattle. It's a place of constant rain, evergreen forests, and skyscrapers dominated by the Space Needle. I love this city, and for a long time, it seemed to love me back. I met Emily at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. She was a barista, and her smile shone brighter than the morning sun breaking through Seattle's infamous clouds. From the first sight, I was head over heels. Her chestnut hair, her laugh that lit up the entire room. Everything about her was perfect. We dated for a year before I proposed. It happened on a ferry ride to Bainbridge Island. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The wind tousled her hair, and I got down on one knee and asked her to be mine forever. With tears of joy in her eyes, she said yes, and at that moment, it seemed to me that all the fairy tales I had ever heard were coming true. Our wedding was modest and intimate. Close friends and relatives gathered at a beautiful venue overlooking Puget Sound. Emily looked stunning in her white dress, and as we exchanged vows, I felt like the happiest man in the world. We settled into a cozy house in Queen Anne, one of Seattle's charming neighborhoods, and life seemed perfect. The first few years of marriage were filled with happiness. We often walked in Discovery Park, had dinner at our favorite seafood restaurant, and explored the city's hidden gems on weekends. I worked as a software developer at an IT company, while Emily eventually quit her job at the coffee shop to start her own small business making handmade jewelry. But over the years, subtle changes started happening in our lives. Emily's business began to take off, which was great, but it also meant that she was working a lot more. Late nights at the studio, weekend craft fairs, endless business events became the norm. I supported her wholeheartedly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were growing apart. I remember the first time I suspected something was off was on a rainy Tuesday. Emily had left early in the morning, supposedly to meet with a new client. She didn't return home until almost midnight, her clothes slightly crumpled and faintly smelling of whiskey. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, claiming the meeting had suddenly turned into a business dinner. I wanted to believe her, but the seed of doubt had been planted. In the following months, those seeds of doubt started to sprout. Emily's absences became more frequent, and her explanations grew increasingly vague. As soon as I started asking questions, she would turn aggressive, accusing me of not supporting her dreams. I tried to be understanding, to trust her, but with each passing day it became harder. And then came the night that changed everything. I had just returned from work, soaked from the relentless Seattle rain. Emily's car was in the driveway, but an eerie silence filled the house. I called out her name, but there was no response. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine in her hand, staring blankly at the TV. "Emily, we need to talk," I said, my voice betraying the storm of emotions raging inside me. She looked at me with annoyance and resignation. "What is it, Jack?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my trembling. "I need to know what's going on. You've become so distant lately. It feels like you're hiding something from me." Anger flashed in her eyes. "I'm not hiding anything from you. I'm just up to my ears in work, Jack. Why can't you understand that?" "It's not just that," I insisted. "You're never home, and when you are, you're always lost in thought. It feels like I'm losing you." For a moment, it seemed like she was about to argue, but then she sighed and set her glass down. "Jack, I don't know how to say this, but I've met someone." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there stunned, unable to comprehend what I'd just heard. "What do you mean, met someone?" She looked away, tears welling up in her eyes. "His name is Tom. We met at one of the craft fairs. He's an artist, and we've been seeing each other for a few months now." The room started spinning before my eyes. A few months? Emily, how could you do this to me? To us? "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want it to happen like this. It just happened. We have a connection that I haven't felt with anyone in years." Betrayal. You think you understand the word until it happens to you. The pain, the anger, the overwhelming sense of loss. It was all too much to bear. That night I left the house and drove around the rain-soaked streets of Seattle for a long time, trying to make sense of what had happened. How did we go from being madly in love to this? Days turned into weeks. Emily moved out, leaving our once happy home an empty shell. I threw myself into work, trying to escape the torment of my thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't forget. Every corner of the city held our memories. The coffee shop where we met, the park where we had picnics, the restaurants where we celebrated anniversaries. It was like living in a ghost town, haunted by the ghosts of the past. One evening, sitting alone in the empty living room, I made a decision. I needed to confront Tom face to face. I needed to see the man who had come between us, to understand what he had that I didn't. I found his address in Emily's old messages, and without a second thought, drove to his apartment on Capitol Hill. It was late. The streets were quiet. I parked a block away from the building and walked to it, feeling my heart pounding. I had no plan. I just knew I needed answers. I pressed the buzzer, and after a few moments, Tom's voice came through the intercom. "Hello? It's Jack, Emily's husband. We need to talk." After a pause, the door opened. I raced up the stairs, anger fueling my every step. When I reached his door, he was waiting for me with a worried look on his face. "Jack, I didn't let him finish. I walked past him into the apartment, my eyes searching for any sign of Emily's presence. "Where is she?" "She's not here," Tom said, closing the door. We broke up." This admission caught me off guard. "What? When?" "A week ago. She said she couldn't do it anymore, that she still loves you." Those words hung in the air, heavy with irony. Loves me? If she loved me, she wouldn't have been with you in the first place. "I'm sorry," Tom said quietly. "I didn't want any trouble. We just clicked." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Clicked? Right. And what now? You just move on to the next one while I'm left picking up the pieces?" Tom looked genuinely remorseful, but it did little to quell the rage boiling inside me. "I don't know what to say, Jack. I'm sorry it turned out this way." "Yeah," I muttered, turning to leave. "Me too." After that night, I spiraled into a darkness I never knew existed. I started drinking heavily, trying to drown the pain that seemed to devour my every waking moment. My work suffered, and eventually I got fired. Friends and family tried to reach out, but I pushed them away, unable to bear their pity. One particularly stormy night, as I sat on the living room floor surrounded by empty bottles, there was a knock at the door. At first I ignored it, but the knocking persisted. Finally I struggled to my feet and opened the door, half expecting to see Emily standing there, begging for forgiveness. But it wasn't her. It was Tom. He looked as awful as I felt, disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes. "Jack, we need to talk." I was too drunk and too tired to argue. I let him in, and he sat down on the couch, taking in the mess my life had become. "I'm worried about you," he finally said. I laughed bitterly. "Worried about me? Why? So you can feel better about yourself?" "No," he said softly. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything. Emily left me too. Said she needed time to figure things out, and now she's gone." The meaning of his words didn't register right away. "Gone? What do you mean?" "She's disappeared," Tom explained. "No one has seen her for several days. She's not answering calls. Her studio is closed. It's like she vanished into thin air. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the pain, a part of me still cared about Emily. The thought of her missing, alone, and possibly in danger, stirred something deep within my soul. Tom and I, unlikely allies, decided to search for her. We retraced her steps, visited the places she frequented, talked to her friends and colleagues, but no one had seen her. Days turned into weeks. The trail grew cold. The police got involved in the search, but there were no leads. Emily had simply vanished without a trace. Tom and I spent countless nights combing through Seattle, hoping for a miracle, but it never happened. Months passed. The reality of Emily's disappearance weighed heavily on both of us. We were broken men, bound by a shared loss, haunted by the ghost of the woman we both loved and lost. I felt myself slipping deeper into the abyss. With each passing day, the hope of finding Emily faded. And then, One fateful evening, a call came that shattered my world completely. It was the police. A body had been found in a remote part of Discovery Park. They needed me to come in for identification. Tom and I drove to the morgue in silence, the air charged with a sense of foreboding. When they pulled back the sheet, I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. It was Emily. Pale, lifeless, a ghost of the woman I had once loved with all my heart. The coroner said she had been dead for several weeks, possibly even months. The cause of death was unclear, but foul play was suspected. Tom wept loudly while I stood there, stunned, crushed by the weight of what had happened. In the days that followed, the investigation into Emily's death turned into a media frenzy. Reporters hounded us, rumors multiplied, and the police questioned everyone who had been close to her. Both Tom and I were suspects at different times, but ultimately no evidence was found pointing to either of us. The truth is, we may never know what really happened to Emily. Whether she was murdered or took her own life in a moment of despair, we were left with more questions than answers. The uncertainty was the worst part, the endless what-ifs and what-could-have-beens that haunted me every waking minute. After the funeral, Tom and I went our separate ways. Too much pain, too many memories, too much guilt. I sold the house in Queen Anne and left Seattle, hoping to find some semblance of peace in places untouched by the shadows of the past. But wherever I went, I couldn't escape the memories. Emily's face, her smile, her laugh. It was all etched into my memory. A constant reminder of what I had lost. The pain of betrayal, the bitterness of her death, the endless grief. This is a burden I will carry to the end of my days. Years have passed since that dark chapter of my life, but the wounds have never fully healed. I've tried to move on, to rebuild my life, but some scars run too deep. I still see Emily in my dreams, hear her laughter in quiet moments, feel the pain of her absence in my very soul. Seattle, once a place of hope and love, has become a city of ghosts for me. A place where dreams turned into nightmares and love into loss. I've learned to live with this pain, to endure the endless night my life has become. But the shadows of Seattle will forever remain a part of me. A ghostly reminder of the love that was consumed by darkness. And so I continue to live, day by day, eternally haunted by the ghosts of the past, eternally searching for a light that may never appear. The story of Emily and I is a story of betrayal, of a broken heart, and an ending so tragic that it has forever changed me.